I want to welcome everybody to this information session about some technology to help with the point-in-time count. My name is Heidi Gold from FinTech Solutions. I'm going to ask everybody to please mute yourselves, mute your personal phones, and if you have questions or need anything, please use the chat. That's part of the that's in your in the Join Me application. So I'm going to kick things off, but my colleagues are on the phone, and Matt, the president of SimTech, is going to jump in a little while and talk about some of the new features we have for 2019. We're delighted to be welcoming returning customers to the call today, as well as new regions who have just signed up for 2019, and some other regions who are just checking us out and seeing what this is all about. So welcome to everybody. This is our 6th year with the mobile app for the point-in-time count. Last year we had more than 30 regions in 13 states, and we've already surpassed that for this year, picking up a bunch of new regions for 2019. It's the only mobile technology that was built specifically for the point-in-time count, and the only technology that really has this view into the data with these kinds of reporting and features. So I think you'll be pleased to see it. The technology itself really has two sides. There's the mobile app where data is collected and entered by your volunteers and people who are collecting data for the count. And then the command center where the data lands and it can be managed in real time, and after the count where the data can be filtered, exported, and where all of the reports are generated. The image that you see in front of you on your screen are the current regions that we are working with for this year. And you can see the shape file for each of the COCs that we use. And this technology is used throughout. You'll see it when we dive in a little bit more. Can I ask, somebody's not muted? That would be great. So I am going to go ahead and start with the mobile app itself, which, as I was saying, you can either download or you can access it here on a computer through a URL. My jaw is just a little bit big. So hopefully you've done this already, where you enter your first name, your last name, the cell phone number, and I'll show you why that's important, and a password. Somebody is still not muted, and it's a little bit distracting to have that background noise.
Heidi, can you mute everyone if you need to for now?
If I mute everybody, Matt, I mute myself.
Oh, okay. We don't want to do that then.
I think that's what happened the last time. Okay, that didn't work. So people do need to please mute yourselves. Thank you. So once you get to this point, you would submit the registration. I've already
into the conference. This call is being recorded.
I've already registered an account, so I'm going to go ahead and back up. And just go, I'm going to go ahead and log right in. Just trying to get smaller. Okay. once you've logged in, you can see that we have in the demo region a number of surveys. Each region has its own data store, which is what this the demonstration data store is, and then within it, you can have multiple activities. And I'll show you that more when we get to the command center. Each region then has its own surveys based on what's in your agreement, what makes sense for your region, and what we've worked together to build in many cases. Standard in the for the PIT activities is a sheltered survey, an unsheltered survey, and an unsheltered homeless observation tally. The youth survey, the vehicle structure tally, and the disaster response are just examples of other ways that we can use the technology. The sheltered survey and the unsheltered survey are almost identical, so I'm just going to walk through quickly the unsheltered survey. It starts with a question about an individual or a household, and all of the report building is embedded in the way that the app collects the data itself. So you're not then at the end of the day figuring it out through, Excel spreadsheets or whatever. Is this a household? Do these individuals go with this household? Is this a parenting, youth household? It's all built directly into the way the app collects the data. So I'll just show it to you. On the household structure, it runs through the surveys multiple times, depending on the number of people that are in the household.
Heidi, I'm sorry.
Matt, I'm trying to see if what you're putting in chat is stuff that I need to be paying attention to.
Okay.
Or are you? Because I'm trying to read that to see if you're responding to me or other folks. So, is everything okay? Can you guys see what I'm doing? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that people just wanted two things. They wanted to know the setup key to use, so they can use the key demo. And if the screen size is small, if you close the chat window itself, it makes it a lot larger. And you can also use as an expand icon on the bottom of the window to make it larger.
I could also I could also just show it as a full screen and not.
I don't think that's necessary because when I closed it out the chat window, it made it pretty large.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. So the household surveys start by just asking the number of people that are in the household, and you enter in a text number there, and you start with OK. And then it begins with the head of the household. But before you get to the survey itself, the location services identify where that individual is. I am working remotely today, so that is my home. You would then go to the next step, which takes the location services on a device often work much better than they do on a computer.
Hey, Heidi, this is Eddie.
Yeah.
If you go up to the top right where it says low-end mobile, if you click that and just change that to online, what's happening is Chrome is purposely slowing everything down for testing, so that should make it move faster.
Thank you, Eddie. That's our lead developer there. So thanks. You can also enter an address. So if I wanted to enter So if I'm entering an address, it can also find any address, and you wouldn't enter a city like that. You would enter a more specific street address. So when you go through the second survey, it's asking you for the relationship to the head of the household. So the first survey is going to be a head of the household, and then you would do the second person of the head of the household as second person in the household. I'm sorry. We have included dependencies in the survey. So the first question's been added to streamline the survey and to improve data quality. And then it starts with the sleeping location. The unsheltered survey has been designed to only move forward if the answer selected is an unsheltered homeless location as identified by HUD. That is our default. It protects data quality and also streamlines data collection. So then you would get into the surveys themselves. Why is this? And this is what I just shared. I think when I switched the phone, something happened. On the sheltered survey, it's set up the same way, except that in the command center, you would set up the organizations and projects. Why is it? I do not know what's going on, Eddie.
Yeah, what happens it'll keep about like refreshing. Making this work well on the phones themselves, and works. It's supposed to work on the browser, but
it's looping right now
for demo purposes.
Yeah, so you might just want to refresh the browser, Heidi, when you switched over. So just hit F5 or open back up.
What do you?
So if you go to full screen mode, hit F12. Go to full screen, hit F5. That should refresh the load on the website itself.
Okay. I apologize, folks. So I'm going to go ahead when you are first logging in and enter the setup key. Each region has its own setup key that you've either been given or will be given that associates the data collection specifically with your account. This is a team function. It's an extra feature that we'll talk about in a little bit, and we'll show you how it works in the command center, but you can skip it. Okay. Okay. So the survey, HUD doesn't require a lot of this information, but we've added it in to help with, again, with deduplication, with aligning with HMIS, with documentation for chronic homelessness. But these questions, some of them can be removed. Gender is a question that was required by HUD. The only question that we require as part of the survey after you get through the initial questions about whether or not you've completed the survey in the past and it's an unsheltered location is the question about age range. And that's because without this information, the report really doesn't know where to put the information. So it needs to know, again, if it's a child, a youth, or an adult. And then we've expanded some other questions to be dependent upon that. The date of birth and age questions, again, are not required, and some regions have opted to remove them, but they do help with deduplication, et cetera. These questions, these demographic questions, are all based on HUD requirements. Homelessness history gets into the questions of duration for chronic homelessness, et cetera. And then we've added in this question into our template. It can be removed, but we're doing a lot of work in areas that have been struck by horrible disasters. And so we're working on including some questions to normalize the data collection for those areas. So again, this is part of customization and it's part of conditional logic. So if you respond that you did become homeless as a result of a disaster, we can ask which one, and then we can drill it down even more. If these lists need to be changed, they can certainly be changed. But we're just, again. The next questions get into disability, that both are part of the subpopulation questions as well as the disability portion of the chronic definition. So if the response is yes to one of these disabilities, there's a pop-up whether or not this is actually a long-term disability that impacts a person's ability to live independently. And that has to also be checked to be considered disabled for chronic. So those continue to go through. Those are all the HUD questions, veteran questions, and then notes. Once the survey is submitted, it leaves the phone and it lands in the command center. So before I leave talking about the app itself, Matt, are there things, I saw a bunch of questions come in. There's things that that you want to hit on for everybody?
So one of the questions that just came in was if there are any default errors if a surveyor puts in inconsistent age, date of birth, and age range, or if the date of birth is something from the previous 2 centuries ago. I think the answer to that really is that there isn't any error handling built into the app itself to handle that. And also keep in mind that some communities don't opt to ask all 3 versions. The age range question we put in place so we can control what questions get displayed below. Date of birth, but you might choose to either use date of birth or age, not asking both of them. But really it's the command center that is where the data quality is monitored and those things can get caught. And it actually sometimes can be interesting to look at if there are discrepancies. Because then it makes you postulate on the quality of the rest of the data when there isn't something that is asked in 2 different ways. So there's that. And then there was a question about extrapolation, and I provided a link to our resources page that has the link to the HUD extrapolation tool. So that was another question that came through. I think it might be good to hit on the save drafts functionality, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are different reasons why you might want to save a draft. It may be that people are having a conversation and they have other information and they know that they want to put that in notes, but they want to do that when they walked away from the individual. There are many of you on the call today who are in very rural areas who may not have cell phone service, and we've talked about this. Though the phones will capture all of the data, including the location data, but when you get to that point of being able to submit, it won't let you submit. So they'll have to save a draft. So the drafts can be popped up here. There are 9 of them here. You would just go ahead and open it. And let's open that one. And you could go ahead and complete it. Got to fill out that age range question. Go ahead and complete it and submit. And that will clear it off. One of the tips that we talk about for administrators is at the end of the night, making sure that all of your count leads have checked in with all of their volunteers, et cetera, and that there are no drafts left on anybody's devices. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anything else about the app itself? I lost a few minutes earlier, so I want to kind of move on. We'll come back to the app maybe later to talk about some of those other surveys if we get to it. So without further ado, I will go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the command center, which is really where the fun things happen. So this is actually the demo data store. Once we get rid of that. So each, like I was saying, each region has its own data store, and the demo one is really the only one that looks like this because the demo data store has people entering surveys from all over the region. Each particular region has its own specific shapefile that is assigned to it, and that's one of the first things we did. For purposes of this one, I'm just going to pick on Tacoma a little bit because I saw that you guys were entering some surveys today. There is not a limit of drafts, but so the data lands here in real time, and I don't know if anyone from Tacoma is on the call and wants to go ahead and submit a survey, and we'll watch these numbers pop up. I happen to know that these are all test surveys. I checked them all out. So you can see the data both in a map view as well as in a list view. And from the list view, you can decide which columns you want to show. You can open any record from either the map view or the list view. And once it's opened, you can see all of the data that was submitted, and you can change it as well. So this is an observation tally. You can also change the location. You can search for a place, or you can physically move a map and then save that location. So this is really important, and again, it's something we talk about with count administrators, that during the count itself, you're going to see data coming in, and you might want to contact the user who submitted it because maybe that person's a little out of range, maybe they're covering an area that was already covered. You now have that person's, and I'm not picking on Dale, but you have that person's, that user's name and their phone number that they are, so you can actually call them while they're out in the field and say, hey, you know, somebody else has already been on that mountain today. And you can do that again from the map view or the list view. While I'm here, I'm also going to show you these map layers. So because this is one county, I'm just put on the city and town layers. So if you've got a mayor in a particular location, you can filter the data just for that area. See, I went from the whole demo data store down to just what's in this area, just the 11 records that are here. And I could actually generate a report over that selected region itself. This is going to give you a fully compliant HUD report just for that small region. You could do it for your whole COC, obviously, which you would do for HUD. But if you've got a mayor or a county official or a foundation or a United Way or something like that, or a CAP agency in a particular area, and you want to give them a sub-report for their region, you can do that. And you can even download it as a PDF and give them a PDF. You can also export the results, which you might not do for this level, but over your whole COC, when your report is final, these export results are the same kinds of files that we generate now for APRs and CAPA reports that get, and LSAs, of course, that get uploaded into the HUD platform. So also from the command center, you can filter your data. So we filtered it here by geography. And then you can also filter it here by subpopulation, if you want to just get a look at your under 18s, just your kids, you can do that, and it continues to break it down. So you've got 2 now that are within these 2 cities that meet that criteria. You can export your data, again, either all of the records completely, just the records that you've now filtered, and you can export all of the fields, or you can customize which fields you want to export. So if you want to export everything except that name and date of birth, you can do that. The beauty of data coming in real time is that you can, again, fix it in real time. So if somebody calls you and they say, oh, that was a duplicate, or that person's going into shelter tonight, we don't want to keep them, we want to get them out of the unsheltered report, you can both open it, you can archive it from here, and now it's gone out of your report, or you can archive it directly from there as well. So that's most of the information on responses with the data coming in. Before I leave this section and take your questions, the activities themselves, this is active because it's the demo region, but when we set up each region for real, we have it in testing mode. And then when somebody goes to submit a survey, they're told that it's in testing mode. This allows you to practice and test and train starting from the, early on until the day you're ready to make it active and go live for the count itself. Okay. At the end of the count, you can also archive it. So we've been archiving a lot of the 2018 counts now. Questions about the command center?
There were a few that came up in the chat. Go through.
Yeah.
So one of the first ones, Max had asked, actually this is related to saving surveys as drafts, was whether or not each draft has to be submitted individually or if they can be submitted in bulk once the field worker is back in range of their mobile networks. The answer to that is currently that they are submitted individually. There are other reasons why someone might want to save a survey off and work on it later, and it's not just because of internet connectivity. It's also because they might just not have finished the survey while they're in front of someone and they wanted to get back to it later. So for that, we wanted to make sure that it's an individualized process. But typically, you're only going to have 2 or 3 surveys max in most communities that are saved off as drafts. So that's that question. Then whoever viewer 28 is had a handful of questions. So viewer 28 at first asked will the app decide the COC location area? So the app isn't really deciding the COC location area. It really is the GPS coordinates and where they fit on the map, and whether the COC is determined based on where that survey hits on the map.
So let me show it. So what we do is we set up the area, and then you can set it up by COC. We do have some states that are doing full statewide counts, but mostly it's by COC, and then we apply that COC. And you basically, I'm applying the shapefile. So, for example, we know we have Texas balance of state, right? So now I've updated that count area, no longer Tacoma, and we're applying that shapefile. So any surveys that get entered within that shapefile are counted in the report. although you can play with that based on the filters that I was just showing you. There's a lot of ways to slice and filter the data. But the beauty of it is, I mean, not so much in Texas balances state, it's not likely to happen, but in some other areas where the boundaries are really close and you might have somebody walking outside of a boundary to survey by, you know, a block or two, you don't have to worry about that because the report will automatically exclude any surveys that are not within a particular count area.
Yeah, and it's also the point that surveys can be moved if, for some reason, they entered in the wrong location. So if you need to move something back in the command center, you can adjust those pinpoints so they do fall within the continuum of care.
Yeah, yeah, we've done.
Yeah, it happens occasionally. Other question came is, in your experience, what's the best way to assure surveyors that the app is not collecting person information on their cell phones if they download and use the app? So I'm not positive if this is referring to their own information. You know, we actually do collect the information about the volunteers that are surveying because we need that so you can reach out back to them. You know, as far as the, you know, how it's used, it's, you know, you're collecting data from that, so you can explain what you're using the data for, and it's to, you know, ideally to engage them during the count process. As far as information on the people being surveyed, the app, the data does not sit locally on your phone. Once it's sent to the command center, once they hit submit, the data is wiped from their phones entirely. So I think that's pretty clear. But if they need, you know, need anything else on that details, we have a security page on our site that explains our privacy and security setup. As far as creating an overlay of our own, you know, your own polygon, special districts, that can be accommodated. We can, so we have what's, you know, we consider our core functionality, and then we do support customization to both the app, as far as the questions go on the app, as well as some additional features and functionality within the command center. And yes, we can include support for custom polygons. So if you have a GIS department or a need to create your own reporting layer, you can do that. Heidi also showed how you can create your own mapping by clicking on the different existing shapefiles that we have. So if you can make your shapefile built based off the building blocks that we do have, which are county, city, town, and zip code, you know, you can get reporting done that way. If there's a compelling need, and we have other communities that want it, we could also look to go down to the census tract layer potentially, and then that really gives you a micro level of being able to build up those special polygons. Can we shut down a surveyor if we have reason to do so? That's interesting. Well, I think we can disable a user account. I mean, you can always delete the data. So you can always, Heidi, you can show like filtering the data. So it's really if they're sending rogue information.
If you want to, I'm just, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Filtering the data.
Yeah, if you go to the surveys themselves. So say you had someone that you just know their data is just awful, and you know they've gone rogue. You can filter by the user and archive all of their surveys.
Yeah, we've done that before. Or at least, you know, you can also just get a list. You know, some people of a list of those users because they want to just, you know, double check what those users have submitted. So now I've got the list, you know, the 22 that I've entered, and here's my list, right? So now I can even export that, send it to the, you know, whoever was responsible for making sure that I did it right, and go through it.
Right.
And then they can fix it in Excel and get it back to you. It's got to be fixed in the command center, but that's part of the data cleanup process. These tools just give you tools to help you do your work more effectively. The work is still there.
Yeah. Archiving is pretty simple. There's that function right there. You can toggle between there. Year 20, Daniel from Spokane. All right. Well, other question. Can we export HMIS data into ClientTrack? So ClientTrack being an HMIS, and this is point-in-time information. If you're looking to, I think the intent of this question is to get to how you can create one aggregate count that combines HMIS data and data that's gathered from the app for both the sheltered count, which is for anyone that's not using HMIS, as well as the unsheltered count of what we're doing right here with the app. On our resources page, we have a framework of how you can create a regional count that combines both sheltered data from HMIS and the data collected in the command center. So I think I'll send a link to that. That's probably the best way to go about doing that. As far as one thing that we do have that it's part of the reporting is a results format similar to the output that goes when you submit an APR to Sage, or if everyone's doing the LSA right now to HUD HDX. That really simplifies the process of aggregating this data from different data sources together. And again, that's also explained on the resource page that I'll link to in the comments in a second. Can we customize our app to collect double up? And if yes, would we select a sheltered or unsheltered survey? Well, if it's double up information, you're typically going to be using the unsheltered survey, and you're going to right now we have logic. If someone is staying in a place meant for human habitation, it actually says thanks for your time, but you can actually turn that off. Work with us, and we can control it so it does allow for the survey questions to continue if they say they're staying with a friend or family, et cetera. And then, yes, the data would hit the command center. They wouldn't show up on the HUD point-in-time report because, again, they don't meet the definition of being literally homeless. But when you go to export the information, the data will be there. And then how much control we have to manage the app or customize it for our needs. Right now, all these surveys are customizable. What we end up doing is it's a process that we share the current questions that are in the surveys that we're showing right now, and we work with you to revise the surveys. There's a core pricing that you would get when you see the contract, and if you want custom survey questions, it's an additional fee to accommodate that. But you can either customize it a little bit, or you can customize it, a fair amount. And we've had some communities that just want to ask, a question or two, and then we have others that have created entire surveys that are specific to them. Connecticut, I believe might be on the call, helped commission the build out of a youth survey as a example. They're doing a statewide youth count, and so that there's that. In Texas, we added questions that were specific to the Hurricane Harvey last year, and we did a statewide impact analysis of the hurricane on the homeless response system. So yes, there's definitely flexibility to tweak the questions. Has there been any thought given to having a chat function from the command center to the surveyor, or an alert system that goes out to all surveyors? Yes, there has been. So that is something that has come up recently. Currently, you can use the straight up text. There's someone is going rogue or not answering something, you can just text them. You do have the information where send them an email. But yeah, to do a broadcast message to everyone, that would be a good feature, and we've noted that request. Can we have access to the demo command center? Talk with us offline, and we will. It's a possibility. So I need to figure out security and what the use case is. I think probably the best case is that we can do a live demo. That's the easiest thing, and to mess around, or we could potentially create a short-term account. But if you do have a request to do that, once you follow up with email to helpdesk@syntechsolutions.com, and that's the same email that you would use if you need support before, during, or after the count, and we can help accommodate you for that. All right, that's all the questions we had in here.
Before I leave the command center, I just want to show you that account administrators would also use this tab to enter their projects. I'm on the all data stores here. And Matt, did you want to talk about other features in the command center before I go away from it, or do you want me to go away from it and come back to it if we need to? Go on to the point in time site and talk about our.
Yeah, I think one of the other aspects that we've been building out. In the last few years, we really have focused on the app and the command center, what you're like how you're collecting the data, and then what you're doing with the data once it's collected, and the management of it, and the creation of the reports and the dashboards, et cetera. All of these dashboards that Heidi is showing, now have drill down functionality. So you can see a list of, like, say you wanted to just see the veterans, maybe it's a pressing initiative. You can see who those vets are. Maybe you wanted a list so you can actually target resources just for those vets, et cetera. You can just use those simple click-throughs to get that information. But in this year, we're expanding our reach, and it actually started last year. And coincidentally, it was Texas Balance of State where we needed to work on this idea of breaking up a really large count into smaller, manageable chunks. So that really is where count team management really, started growing. And since then, we've actually also added the ability to create a volunteer registration portal ahead of the count to get information from volunteers, key information that you might use to help create your count teams. So the functionality that Heidi's showing now is actually going to be updated even further. And again, this is additional functionality. This isn't part of the core offering because it's not something that every region needs. If you're a small region, you don't need to break it up any further because it's manageable as it is. But if you've got such a large geographic spread as the state of Texas, you can see there might be a need to have different deployment centers. You're not going to send someone from the north of Texas down to the south of Texas, et cetera. And you might set up, the idea of this is you can have count team administrators that are managing the survey information that's just pertinent to their sub-area, their sub-region. So the idea being is if you have a large region, it's overwhelming to take it all on at once. But if you can split it up, King County, for example, is another example. Georgia Balance of State would be another large region. LA County has 8 service planning areas. If you want to break up those large regions into smaller manageable parts, you can do that. And so, the functionality that isn't quite here yet is just new functionality that we're deploying for, actually, Spokane is going to be using part of this, and King County in Washington is also using it, is the idea of tying in the volunteer registration portal itself. I don't know if you want to jump over to that as an example. So this is a custom subdomain. So if you notice at the top, the URL is kingcounty.pointintime.info. That's set up specifically for their needs. They provide us a stylized logo, and we work with them on the content. And we're gathering some core information about the volunteer. So if you were to click on register, you get an idea of really, some key information if you're going to be managing all these incoming volunteers that you would use to figure out who your account teams are. Now, for King County, they have deployment centers. I think with Spokane, they're not using the deployment center concept, but we can. If you don't do that approach and you have more of a blitz approach, you can hide that. But if you do need deployment centers, we can accommodate that as well. So the point of all that is we're now broadening the work to be more comprehensive because we know that managing all the volunteers leading up to the count is another large undertaking that could be automated.
It's also, if I could just chime in, I think with Texas it also helped sort of empower and engage a lot of the local communities. I think a lot of this technology has helped empower and engage both volunteers and local communities because they have access to the data in a way they never did before, and in the case of count teams, they can actually have more access to managing, their piece of it. When there might be a real disconnect between, where somebody is and where the count is being managed out of. Any other questions?
We just had one question that came up in the chat.
Yeah.
About can we have more than one manager admin account for our COC? And the answer is yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything on the app and the command center. I don't know. We have a few more minutes, Heidi. I don't know if we want to open it up to questions from the phone, and then if anyone that's an existing user has any comments too, we can take those as well.
Yeah, let me just quickly just show folks real quick where our supports are. So somebody just said support issues. So we have pointintime.info, which is kind of the go-to place for all of our resources. It's where you can get more information and all of these links, and you can log into the command center. We have HUD resources. We have some videos that are now a little bit old, but we've posted our own resources as well. So we have a tool for domestic violence projects. We have a getting started sort of step-by-step instructions, which you can fill out and send out to your volunteers ahead of training, encouraging them to also download the app in advance. We have the standardized questions are available both in PDF and in Word format. So not only for paper holdouts, but for training or other purposes. If you're customizing a survey, it might be helpful to see what we've got and work with a Word document, and some tips that we just kind of put together. So there's a whole lot of other things here. We have a bunch of support FAQs and other information. But yes, let's open it all up for questions now. And if people want to unmute yourself and ask a question, we can try to do that too, unless it gets unwieldy. Someone said, how do we log in? Once we get a contract with you, some of the process almost immediately is setting up your region in the command center, and then setting up whoever the administrator is as an admin, and then we create that administrative account based on our contract. Once you're an administrator, you can log in to the command center with your same credentials that you use for the app, and you can also manage and create other administrators or managers for your account. Other questions? Help desk hours of operation. We are aware that we are working nationally and that we've got people that are 3 hours behind where we are. We're pretty attentive to the help desk, and certainly we keep track of everybody's counts themselves. And during the count itself, we are we're on. So immediate, 24.
Yeah. Outside of the count, our typical operating hours are between 8:30 and 5:30 Eastern Time. But we've been known to respond to questions outside of those hours too.
So if folks are interested and they contact us, we can we'll definitely follow up with a personalized demo, asking and answering specific questions about your region. The core features that are part of sort of the core offering are those sheltered and unsheltered surveys, everything we basically showed you in the command center, and then training, support, follow-up support. How long does it take for setup for the first time? If there are no custom questions, we can get you turned around within a couple of hours. If we really need to, it can be even shorter than that. But it really depends on your schedules. If you are going to be customizing questions, we need to have those questions available, before we can set up your command center, because they go right into the surveys. And we recommend doing that before you do any training or anything else. So the planning is really working with us to get your command center set up, all of your features and everything aligned, and then working with you to effectively train your hit leads and so that they're ready to work with their volunteers. Anything else?
Okay. In the meantime, if anyone does want to reach out to us directly as a group, you can use the team@simtechsolutions.com email. And then, like I said, if you do have a help desk inquiry and you're a client, you can use helpdesk@simtechsolutions.com.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending.